Rise, renew, reconnect. Welcome to From the Ashes, a podcast where every story ignites hope and healing.
Send the fire in the darkest night. A phoenix burns. It's ready for flight. Shadows may come, try to tear you apart, but you're the flame.
All right, welcome back, everyone. This is Valerie, and we are with Dr. Erika Shah. She is a board-certified licensed acupuncturist and doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and one of the doctors at Urban Salt Acupuncture in Long Beach, California. So welcome, Erika.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We are going to get into a lot today, and I would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience and let us know something that's important to you and maybe a fun fact.
Okay, perfect. Well, the one that always gets my patients is that I'm a twin, younger by 20 minutes. So I like to joke that I kicked her out to, guinea pig experiment with the world first. But she is like my favorite person in the world, sharing that place with my husband. Shout out to Michael. So yeah, that's kind of my fun fact. I'm from Oregon originally, used to live on a farm, so grew up a lot with like cattle, chickens, ponies. But yeah, now I love California. I moved here in 2019 and I never plan to leave. It's honestly so amazing. No shade to Portland, but also
Well, I'm glad you like it here. And I read on your bio that you are a fan of Chinese and K-dramas. So
yes. Oh
I
my
was
God.
very I was very
We could go
excited
on for days about this, truly.
to
So good.
I have to admit, so, like, I watched some. When I get into it, I get into it. I get stuck in there. But I don't spend too much time on there. I would still like to know, what's your favorite Chinese drama?
Oh man, they're all so good, but there's a special place for like the first one, right? Which is like Who Rules the World? So good. It's
Yeah.
very like fighting heavy and the choreography is always incredible. But then you have like a lot of the politics and then like a princess, prince mixed with, their different like sect leaders when it comes to martial arts. It's just truly it's so beautiful. I love it. I love the love scenes. I love the fighting. It just covers everything. It's wonderful. Highly recommend.
Yeah. And, what got you into that?
Oh gosh. Oh, it all started with BTS. So like I just went from Korean to Chinese and like Mandarin and all that. But yeah, massive love for BTS. Then I started wanting to, know what they're actually saying in the songs. So I started learning Korean. And I have to say, I feel like Mandarin's a little easier for me. There's just
Oh, wow.
something about it. I know you never hear that, but so then after like 500 days on Duolingo of learning, and that's probably the first mistake, because honestly, Duolingo, not the best teacher. I switched over to Mandarin, and I feel like I'm picking that up a lot faster. And then, the goal is to be able to walk to my kitchen and not have to like pause the show and be able to like still understand what they're saying.
Amazing. Alright. So now that we know that you're a big Chinese and Korean pop fan and drama fan, does that
Okay.
tie in at all to your work as a Chinese medicine doctor?
Funny enough, right, the acupuncture came first, but I like to say it gives me a little more street cred. But yeah, so the goal is to someday communicate in Mandarin to patients who might not be able to speak English as well. We had to
Mhm.
learn, the Chinese pinyin in school for the herbs, and so, we have, like, little medical terminology, I suppose, when it comes to that, but not so much the actual conversational piece. So slowly but surely, someday.
Yeah. Cool. So
Perfect.
I always like to ask people first their from the ashes story. So this could be a time in your life where something challenged your beliefs or about who you are, where you made like a decision to start over, or where something fundamentally or dramatically changed your life. So,
Oh, man. Okay, well, let's tie it into acupuncture because it's my whole career now. But in middle school, we were all made to take this career placement quiz and, has to do with your belief system, what you want to be paid, like the purpose you want to have in life kind of thing. And so for me, it ended up being alphabetically listed and acupuncturist was what showed up. And so I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to be an acupuncturist. And, very happy go lucky with all of that. And it wasn't until, like, later in high school that I started looking at tuition that I was like, "There's no way that this is gonna be possible for me." You know, like, at the time, it was 100K to go to school for it, and, like, full transparency, I'm in 200K debt out of school for it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, and so even thinking then, when it was 100K, I was like, "There's no way. I'm gonna be a personal trainer or something that is still health and wellness, but not nearly, not gonna put me back that much." And so, that was kind of the path I was on, and it wasn't until junior year in high school, I was playing soccer. I kinda got bulldozed by this girl. I was a defender, and I got up, it didn't really hurt, but it was the next day at practice that I was running and I moved the wrong way and my rib dislocated. And that was kind of it for me. I couldn't move. It was out for 4 to 5 hours. A chiropractor had to come on scene, and then he was able to pop it back in, but on the way home, it popped right back out. Went to the ER, and they're like, "You know what? It's a rib. Ribs are ribs. Here's some pain meds." I was like, "This is unacceptable. This is like, really, that's the best answer you have for me?" And so, yeah, basically the next day I had to miss school because I was in debilitating pain. Like, my parents even gave up their bed for me because it was the nice Tempur-Pedic. It was, like, the only thing I could sleep in. And my mom is an English school teacher, so when she got back from teaching her students, she's like, "Well, how are you feeling?" I was like, "Still horrible, still can't move." And someone else was feeding me food because I couldn't lift my arm because it's all connected. And she's like, "You know what? F it. You used to wanna be an acupuncturist. Let's go try one out. Tracy knows this great one." So, basically, she drove me out. I was in, like, a horrible mood, and it was just, like, the first impression you never wanna leave with someone, but when you're in pain, and it doesn't always bring out the best side of you. And I kid you not even 30 minutes after having the needles in, it's like it never happened. It was truly magical. And she didn't even touch my rib. It was all like elbows down, knees down, and it was gone. And not everyone has a miracle case like that, but especially
Mhm.
it's more common when you're young. But yeah, it was incredible. And from that day forward, started apprenticing with her, and I changed my mind. I was like, even if I have to be in hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, it'd be incredible just to be able to give back and do this for one person. And that's kind of my origin story. That was my moment.
So this happened when you were a teenager, right?
It did. Yeah.
Okay. And so did you go directly from, high school to acupuncture college?
No, so you actually have to have the credit equivalent of a bachelor's in order to attend. So, because I knew what I wanted to be from a young age, I did a year of college in high school, and then I went to community college, got my associates in a year, and then I went to massage school and got the credit equivalent through massage certification. Then I applied to the master's program and then got my master's and doctorate at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Alright.
I like you gotta cheat the system somehow. You don't need to have a bachelor's in French studies or what have you. Yeah, you just might as well
Yeah,
go straight there.
beautiful. So, now that you do have the doctors in acupuncture, what is your take on what happened?
Oh, you mean with my rib?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I mean, a lot of times and orthopedics is my specialty, ironically, now that we're here. So, what I think happened was the muscles got really tight in order to kinda surround that area when I hit the impact on the ground. And so when the muscles get super tight, they can pull ribs or, your vertebra out of place. That's why a lot of people have to go to chiropractors. And that's why I always recommend chiropractors who do muscle work because the adjustment isn't really gonna stay if you don't do the muscle work. If they're coming out of place because the muscles are tight, then it's not gonna do anything just to, like, put it back into place only for the muscles to pull it back out. So, basically, muscles went into spasm in that part of my back, ripped my rib out of the facet joint, and then because it was out for so long, the cartilage was damaged from the expanding of my rib cage every time I breathed, so it wasn't gonna, like, just stay there and go back into place without slipping right back out. So, yeah, basically a lot of, like, muscle tightness mixed with needing to just give it time and probably bind my ribs, which
Mhm.
looking back, I wish I would have done that instead of just not have anything wrapped around them.
Yeah. And I want to know how your perception of yourself has changed from that experience.
Mm. Well, it's nice finally having the tools. That's the first thing. And honestly, the biggest thing I learned from it was not to really judge my patients when they come in like a piss poor mood. Because I even did that with my own dad. He suffered from, like, a ton of back pain, and I remember just thinking, like, "Look, there's no reason for you to take this out on the family. You have a bad back, you're gonna have to just deal with that." And then after that experience, I was like, "Oh, no, pain really does change someone." So I never try to, like, judge my patients when they come in with a poor attitude, especially when they're skeptical about acupuncture working. Like,
Mm,
this is truly their, like, last-ditch effort, and they're here just trying it because, like, for them, they probably think it's very woo-woo, and they're like, "You know what? I've tried everything, it's time to try this." Of course, they're gonna be in a bad attitude and a bad mood, and so
mhm.
I just try to kind of just take it for what it is and, like, make them feel better when they leave.
So, how long have you been in practice so far?
Only a year.
Okay, so you're pretty new to it.
Mhm.
Have you had any really, like, eye-opening experiences with patient?
I mean, like, constantly, it's hard to, like, think of just one. One of the biggest ones was, like, polymyalgia rheumatica. That's a bit like autoimmune and kind of presents as, fibromyalgia, but it has a lot added, I suppose, like, it attacks the shoulders a lot and the joints, which, it's kind of they're all very similar when you have a flare, but that was the case that I really, like, learned to lean into herbs a bit more. I'm very much, like, prone to just really relying on my needling and loving the acupuncture and motor point side of things, but that was a big one where I kinda saw the power of herbs.
So, since I'm an Ayurvedic practitioner, we can go into this a little bit deeper if you would like.
Oh, please, yes.
Yeah, and also, I'd love to do a little bit of a side-by-side comparison of Ayurveda's approach and Chinese medicine approach. I don't know too much about Chinese medicine. We did, like, an introductory course in my massage therapy training, and that's about the extent of it. From what I understand, though, a lot of the philosophical tenets of the 2 sciences somewhat have, parallels.
Mhm.
And a lot of the approaches too are multifaceted, right? So in the United States, acupuncture is kind of the main modality that's practiced in TCM, as far as I know,
Mhm.
with herbs and everything else being secondary, right?
Mhm.
So my first question to you is, how were you taught the system of medicine, and how does that differ from how you actually practice?
So I practice a lot orthopedically, which is not even necessarily TCM, nor is it just like another type of acupuncture. It's very like motor point based. Like you got to know like the muscle insertion, origin, and then like the motor point of it, like which is usually in the body of the muscle, right? So I was taught with TCM, and this is true for a lot of things, like especially when I don't do ortho stuff, but everything, right? So, like, let's say headaches, for instance. So, in Chinese medicine, we don't really treat that diagnosis, we treat the pattern.
Mhm,
So, if it's sharp, for instance, that's an excess of something. So, is it blood stagnation? What is causing the sharpness, right? And then, or for instance, like, what time of the month is this person getting their headache? For instance, like, does it hurt more right before the period or does it hurt after the period? If it's dull and it hurts after the period, it's a blood deficiency headache. Whereas if it hurts leading up to the period, that's like a blood stagnation. There's some sort of like chi stagnation excess as well. So you kind of have to look more at the pattern. There's no protocol for like, oh, someone has headaches. Give me the
yeah.
protocol for that. It's more like, okay, well, where is it? If it's the forehead, that's a yang ming headache. So we're going to treat like the large intestine and the stomach. If it's in the back, like a tension headache usually starts from the back and goes forward, then we treat the UB. And that's like using more of the channel theory behind it. So, like in Chinese medicine, we don't ever really treat the diagnosis, we treat the pattern because multiple people will have knee pain, but it's not always the same reason. And there's different points to be used for different reasons that the pain is there. And then, so for orthopedics, sometimes with the knee pain, I can treat with what we were just talking about. Like, okay, if it's B syndrome, I need to get rid of the dampness a lot of times or the coldness that is trapped in the joint. But sometimes, like this person just blew out their knee in jujitsu. And so I'm like, okay, well, like your MCL has a bit of a moment. So now, like, let's needle around the MCL and the points that surround it. And that might not always be super pattern based. That's more
Right.
orthopedic. But I still like to use certain points, for instance, like chi clef points. Those are great for pain along the channel. So I might do my typical like knee protocol, which I know is ironic because I was like, you shouldn't have protocols. But when it's ortho, it's a little bit different. And then add chi clef points for like pain along the channel for where they're feeling it most. Does that make
Great.
sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
So
cool.
there are very similar approaches in Ayurveda.
Mhm,
We so technically, you're always looking at the pattern. That's right. But I think throughout, the thousands of years that it's been around, they've developed certain common patterns, right? And so that has become somewhat of the diagnosis for our part is like we'll see like, oh, you have this diagnosis. However, there's like, different subtypes that can happen depending on which forces are at play or which
mhm,
forces are dominant in that person or in that condition. And so, yeah, there isn't really like coming in with a certain condition. You're just like, that's the treatment that you're going to get. If that happens, you're probably seeing someone who's probably not doing what they should be doing, right? In terms of being thorough with the patient and like, what their life is about. Because at the end of the day, I think it's important to know like who's sitting in front of you.
mhm,
Uh, yeah, for treatment. Okay, so then that comes to like, there's also all these other components outside of the needles that are part of Chinese medicine, right? And that are less talked about and less practiced in the practice. I think probably because of insurance for a large part, but also just like what is popular.
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I know that, we as Ayurvedic practitioners, we often like herbs is a very huge thing, but then diet and lifestyle are also like primary in our treatment plans. So, how, with your approach, do you find yourself incorporating any of that at all? And how big of a part does that play in your uh,
Mhm.
approach?
Yeah, no, it's definitely an important one and one I'd like to utilize more. So, when it comes to diet, I'll admit that I'm not like the expert on it, so I would love to be able to refer people to you. There are like certain things that are obvious. So, if someone's like, let's say they have coxcrow diarrhea, which is a really fancy way of saying they have to like have an explosive diarrhea moment at like 5 in the morning or like when they first wake up, and it's usually watery and there's usually undigested food in it. So what that tells us is generally there's like a spleen and kidney yang deficiency. So how can we help our spleen, and which is kind of like known for kind of cooking it and like the metabolism, being able to like, put our chi into ways that we can better use it, I suppose, is like the layman's way of saying that. So, for instance, let's not have like salads or raw foods or something that would be hard for the spleen to be able to like transform and transport.
Mhm.
And so, for instance, I tell people like, okay, like if you have salads and like that, try to like add hot soup afterwards. So you're like helping it out. Or kind of like how you already see sushi, where you like pair it with the ginger. That's
Mhm.
a very smart way to deal with it. Because if you're just only having like raw, cold foods, that's gonna keep the food being undigested because your spleen and is being taxed and you don't have enough spleen chi to really help it out. So that's kind of like an example of like just easy dietary changes. Or for instance, if someone has like stomach fire and they have like really bad breath and they have heartburn, and we're like, okay, it's you got to stop the greasy food or the hot food, like the buffalo wings need to cease. So kind of like very generic, almost like common sense kind of things I can help with. But when it comes to like, an actual solid dietary plan, I would 100% defer to you and someone
Mhm.
who like has a certification and something like that because that's not my expertise.
Mhm. Were you trained in it at all in school?
We did have one term, which again is hardly enough when it comes to something that generally takes people like a year or two to get certified in. And so I have a book of it of like, for instance, like black sesame seeds are great for the kidneys, like things like that, you know? And so
Yeah.
it breaks it down and, like, it has a really substantial list. I'm, like, trying to remember what it's called. I think it's, like, healing with whole foods or something like that, and it breaks it down, for instance, like, let's say you have yin deficiency, look on page 26, and these are all the foods that you would want to supplement with in order to heal with food first before you even have to go to medication.
Okay, got it. So there are a few topics I want to cover today. So I want to get into the what is it? The psycho emotional disorders that you treat, anxiety, stuff like
Mhm.
that, autoimmune especially. But before we touch upon that, in Chinese medicine, there are a lot of terms that are used that sound completely foreign to the normal person. For example, dampness, wind, chi, all of that. So, for the listeners out there who have really never heard of TCM, can you just give like a very brief layman's overview of what those terms are or the
Yeah,
important ones
I'll
to know?
try.
Yeah.
A lot of it's a completely different paradigm, and I was just having this conversation with a patient today, so it's, like, fresh in my mind. For instance, I was telling them, like, "You have liver cheese stagnation," which in California, I'm like, "Who doesn't?" We're a very livery bunch. So they're like, "Well, so do I need to do a liver cleanse?" I'm like, I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt, but no, like, that's not what I mean." Because the liver in Chinese medicine, it doesn't automatically transfer over to the liver in Western medicine. It's almost kind of like the esoteric version, and, like, some things do transfer over, some things do make sense, but for instance, the spleen, how Chinese medicine views it is almost more like the pancreas, I suppose? So yeah, like we have chi, so let's start there. And that's kind of, I suppose you could say, like ATP on a Western standpoint. It's kind of like the energy that keeps things going in your body. You could also look at it as when there's an obstruction of that, or like you start, those people who need to go and exercise to feel better about themselves. They just feel like crap until they like go for a walk. That's someone who has like liver cheese stagnation. They need to like move their body in order to feel better. And so liver is basically the general, the commander of chi, like the guy who is in charge of making sure that like people are running, doing their thing. And so anytime there's like some sort of like mental, emotional concern with patients, we always have to look at the liver first because they're kind of in charge of all like free flowing chi and emotions. There's different organs that correlate with certain emotions, like lung is grief and so on and so forth. But we also have to look at the liver component as well. I'm trying to think of the other one. So, dampness, for instance,
Mm.
usually the key component of looking at dampness would like someone would think an overweight person, but that's not always the case. That's just an easiest obvious going like, "Oh yeah, they have dampness." It doesn't correlate with phlegm or fat always, but, for instance, like the grandma who can tell when it's gonna rain, like she's got that pain in her joints, like that's a damp kind of thing. Or, for instance, like digestive issues as well. A lot of times that correlates with dampness. Even the one that I just talked about recently on like an old post was brain fog. That can also be a sign of dampness, but more so hurting your shen or your like mental wherewithal, I suppose. And so there's so many different things. It doesn't truly like transfer over to the Western way that we might like it to. It doesn't always correlate. There's even like blood deficiency, for instance, and that doesn't always correlate to anemia.
Yeah.
More often than not, 95% of the time it will, but not always.
So when I started learning Ayurvedic medicine, I learned a lot about myself because I was given this new paradigm of understanding my body and also understanding my mind, my emotions. And it really transformed the way that I look at my entire life. So, having gone through your Chinese medicine program and all of that, do you find that you have also changed how you look at yourself? And if so, how?
Oh, yes, all the time. It's even, like, worked its way into my relationships. So, like, my husband will sigh, and I'm like, "Ooh, liver cheese stagnation, what's happening there?" Because, sighing is, like, a way to kind of move the liver chi. But then, it's also given me a lot of grace. Like, I've put on some weight over the past year and looking at it from like the dampness standpoint too. Like, well, what is causing this? Like, where is this obstruction? Because it's just hard to look at life differently unless it's through that, it has to be through that lens because that's like what I know now. That's who I am. That's what I do. And I honestly, from the ortho standpoint, am constantly watching how people move, looking and assessing their gaits. I'm like, "Ooh, that guy has a tight piriformis. He needs to have that released." So, yeah, I mean, I would definitely say it's a massive thing. And looking at people's tongues, those like that trend whenever people stick their tongue out, like just constantly assessing. I wonder if that's something you do too, just like looking at people's faces even, because we also have Chinese face reading. And so that's definitely something I also consider.
Yeah. So the face reading is very popular on the Chinese medicine side, and I'm really intrigued by it. So and we don't do it a lot in Ayurveda. We do, but it's not one of the modalities that we are, like, very formally taught.
We actually don't formally learn it either. This was a book I read before I went to acupuncture school, and, Lillian Bridges, she has since passed, but, like, she wrote it, and she's absolutely amazing, and that book is just incredible. But I can tell you, like, the things that I know and that do stand out. So, for instance, your face can be divided into like three separate levels. So, like right above your eyebrows to your hairline, and then from like that, glabella down to like your philtrum right above your lip, and then from there down to your chin. And so it kind of separates how people go throughout the world and like what they think and like how they view things. So one of the examples that was used like was a car salesman. So if you see someone who has like more of the like let's say a five head, if you will, which no judgment, I'm definitely that person. They're more prone to like wisdom, whereas the eyes more practicality, and then the mouth is more feeling. So you would approach these people differently if you're trying to sell them something. It was funny, she would mention that she has a brother who's in business and he utilizes face reading in order to like close deals.
Mhm.
So let's say I'm trying to sell you a car. Like if you have a larger portion in the forehead area, I'd be telling you more about the statistics behind why it's the best car and why you should leave with it today. Whereas if you have more between the eyebrows and the philtrum, which is like the part right above your lip, I would be like, let's say you're, a soccer mom or you have a lot of kids, like, okay, the minivan, it's practical. This is going to get your kids from point A to point B. Who cares if they spill? It's not like a Maserati or whatever. I don't really know cars that well, but you get my point. Whereas definitely if you see someone with the philtrum down to the chin, like with the larger feeling, this is might be someone who's like having a midlife crisis. You're like, oh yeah, you want to feel young again. You're gonna like be so cool. You're gonna attract all like, potential partners in this car, that kind of thing. And so that's a way that people, I suppose, can utilize it. One of the ways that we as practitioners can look at it from more of a healthy standpoint is like this is if you have like lines from in the philtrum, right?
Mhm.
This is more indicative like poor lungs, and you can often see this with smokers with the pursing of the lips
Okay.
and even people with like COPD and whatnot. And then this is more, oh, I'm like pointing. People aren't gonna know what that means. But okay, so like the line that if you were to connect eye to eye over the bridge of your nose, that's more with like healthy food. So a lot of times people who have that line across need to clean up their diet.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's pretty cool. I love it. I obviously am not doing it justice, so please go read her book, but it's super neat.
Yeah. Yeah, I would be really curious to see what my face says, other than that I probably look really tired, but
Girl, you and me both. Same.
hey, listeners, if you're enjoying the stories and insights from the Ashes, why not stay connected with our community? Join my mailing list for bi weekly updates on upcoming events, wellness tips, fun tidbits, and of course, new podcast episodes. I promise no spam, just valuable content to help you live your best life. Head over to www.intrepidwellness.life and sign up today. Don't miss out, and let's keep the conversation going. All right, so let's move on to your experience with treating psycho-emotional disorders, autoimmune, and all of that. This is actually a really huge topic and particular topic of interest mine. I went into Ayurveda and continue to practice with a focus on helping people manage these particular concerns. And the reason why is because a lot of our suffering comes from the mental realm,
Mhm.
especially these days where we are more emotionally aware and the symptoms of stress tend to present more in the emotional, I think. And also because especially when I was studying Ayurveda, what I was seeing is that in autoimmune disorders, it would often be an expression of an emotional or mental distress that presents in the body. So, I want to hear your perspective on all of this and what you have seen in your practice.
Yeah, well, so first and foremost, it's a huge deal to me too because my twin has 2 autoimmune disorders, and I think that's, like, one of the biggest reasons that everyone's like, "Well, why don't you? You're twins, right?" And I look at our high school experiences, and they were relatively similar except how we perceived stress. And so she perceived stress very differently, whereas I was kinda like, "You know what? Like, is this something I'm gonna worry about on my deathbed? And if not, I'm not gonna stress about it." Like, and that's just that truly changed my life, so I highly recommend if you're ever stressing, you're like, "Will I be thinking about this, like, with my last dying breath? And if not, like, don't worry about it." Whereas, like, everything for her was, like, she was just fighting for trying to get, like, the best grade possible, which again is important, sure, but at the expense of her health. And, like, hers started with, anxiety, and then it started with vasovagal syncope, and she was, like, passing out in bathroom stalls. And but yeah, like, it was she interpreted stress very differently, even though we were living the same life to an extent.
Mhm,
But hers also manifested too after, like, a severe Achilles injury that just would not heal. And so I think, part of it, I'm like, "Okay, was it from the Achilles mixed with everything else?" Because that was the big difference between what she had happening compared to what I had happening. So but it's interesting because my acupuncturist that I first started with, she said that, like, she pushed herself at or burnt the candle at both ends, I suppose, to the point
mhm,
where, like, she developed blood cancer. And so a lot
mhm,
of people will be like, "Okay, well, let's not blame, like, maybe that was just gonna come about no matter what." But I look at my twin and I'm like, "Well, we are truly identical. I have every genetic factor that she does, like, we are identical twins, and so, like, I have the capability to also have an autoimmune disorder."
mhm.
And so I do think what you're saying with the stress, the mental illness, all that really does lead you down a certain road if it's not managed well or dealt with. And so, yeah, like we don't do enough in this culture, in this country to like take care of the mental illness issue. And yeah, I can't speak enough about that. Acupuncture is incredible for it. Exercise, what have you. Anything that is your outlet, please, by all means. But a lot of it is stress management first.
Yeah, it definitely is, and it's just, I think it is a hard thing for people to really grasp. So I'm going to first give a very brief explanation from an Ayurvedic standpoint of how we look at autoimmune. And then I want, yeah, after that, for you to kind of fill in the gap and tell me what you see or what you hear, rather, when I talk about this and see if there's anything in Chinese medicine that may also cover this topic, because these are ancient medicines, right? And so they might not have the exact language for what people are going through right now, especially with autoimmune. There was no word for autoimmune in Sanskrit, but there were certain things that we could see in terms of patterns, because Ayurveda is really great at dealing with chronic issues, and autoimmune issues are chronic issues. So the way that Ayurveda sees things is that there's always going to be a digestive component, and that is often early stage, right? Because And now we know that gut health is very directly linked to mental health and emotional health and the nervous system, right? So the nervous system, the gut, and just the way that we process food, they're all connected. When we have a lot of stress, we're just instantly impacting our gut, and it's going to create some kind of digestive distress, in the form of whether that be gas or acidity or slow digestion, slow metabolism, etc., depending on the energy that is dominant. And from there, if that stress is not addressed, then it goes on to overflow into the rest of the body and cause more systemic issues. And then from there, if it's not addressed and the person hasn't realized that something is going on, then it starts to lodge itself, those excess energies and diseased energies start to lodge themselves into weaker parts of the body or parts of the body where that energy has affinity. And then eventually, then it becomes a full-blown disease. That's one component. The other is that there is this notion of toxicity in the body. And toxicity is caused when food is digested poorly and creates like quote unquote metabolic waste, toxins that are continue to be lodged in the system. That can create a lot of dysfunction in the way that the body is running. And it can lodge that, what we call ama or toxins, lodges itself in the body to cause inflammation, etc. Then the final component of all of this is the notion of resilience and immunity and the ability for the body to also recognize itself as friend, not foe. And when we have a lot of resilience, when we have something called ojas, which is kind of like our vital essence. It's a little different from chi. It's more of like the kind of like the golden ooze like that we see in our body that keeps us strong. That can be very depleted by, burning the candle at both ends or emotional distress, anything that can compromise your immunity, compromise your ability to cope. So when that resilience wanes, then the body starts not to see itself as friend anymore. Especially if you're depleted and then you also have toxins like circulating your system, then of course it's like the body's thinking, "Oh no, we got to fight whatever's there." So it starts to fight itself. There's a lot more that can go into this, but that's kind of like the brief overview of how I have seen autoimmune from a very broad Ayurvedic standpoint. So, I just want to hear your thoughts on that from the TCM perspective.
Well, first of all, fascinating. Love to hear it. It sounds like Ayurvedic is very similar to kind of like the earth school of, Chinese medicine, which isn't necessarily like the traditional sense. There's like different ways to practice all over the world. And like the earth school of thought is that like the earth is at the center of everything. So if there's like an issue anywhere, look at the spleen and stomach. So that totally does resonate with like a certain way that some acupuncturists do treat. And it's actually funny because Sjogren's is more often than not diagnosed in Chinese medicine with the pattern of stomach yin deficiency, whereas
Mm,
like there's not enough fluid. So like the salivary glands are no longer producing enough, the eyes are dry, like everything. Like Sjogren's is basically not having enough like anything like water, hydration, whatever, and it leaves the person feeling like they're basically blinking sand.
okay.
Usually you find it in 6-year-old women, but sometimes, like my twin, you can find it in like, someone as
Oh,
early as 20. So that's unfortunate. So that totally corresponds with how you were viewing it or how like Ayurvedic medicine does. And there is a certain component where I'm like, well, when did this really all start? Because it truly is chronic, like you were saying. And I can think back to my sister, for instance, and in high school, she 100% was spleen chi deficient. Is that the thing that maybe set it all off? And like it might not be a spleen chi deficiency by the time it became, rheumatoid arthritis and Sjogren's, but it definitely was a massive component to, like, the unraveling, like you were saying. And so, in certain autoimmune, we don't necessarily always look at it from, like, an earth or spleen and stomach standpoint. Sometimes, more often than not, we look at it due to its chronic aspect as being more of a yin deficiency or, like, a yin and blood deficiency, generally of, like, liver and kidneys. And then there could be components of dampness with that as well, but who's to say that it didn't start with the spleen?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and how based on what you have seen so far in your clinic, how does the mental component relate to the physical component of health?
Oh, man. It's so hard to say because, like, it really does affect everyone differently based on their perspective and outlook of it. Some
Mhm.
people view this as, like, a life sentence, that, like, their life will never be the same again, which they're not necessarily wrong, but that outlook is not gonna help them heal either. And then some people look at it as like, "Oh, yay, I'm only a 4 out of 10 today, like, I'm kicking ass." And so, like, the perspective shift, it's hard when you're in perpetual pain or your energy levels are tanked to where they used to be. But I do see that, like, the mental aspect, I can't even give you a straight answer because it truly is dependent on the patient and how they're, like, taking the L's. You know, some people just really struggle with it, and other people are more glass half full or glass half full. I'm not even sure what I said. I think I said something else. But yeah, so, the outlook is massive. A lot of times these with something that is autoimmune, it goes into remission, but it can always come back, and so we generally tell our patients, you know, like, "We can probably get you down to a monthly maintenance, but this is something that, like, you will have to continue to get treatment for." And a lot of people don't love that answer, but then the people who have had it for, like, over 5 years are generally more understanding. They're like, "Oh, yeah, as long as, like, I can go to work and as long as I can take my kids to soccer practice and be able to do that and live a life, even if I'm not at 100%, I'll do whatever it takes." So there has to be like some sort of acceptance that's been reached, I think, for people to be able to get the most out of their healing. When people are still like fighting it or have kind of succumbed to it, that's where I see like the biggest issue and the biggest like block to their healing.
Yeah. Do you ever have people come in who you feel like have already given up? And if
Yes.
so, how do you what do you tell them? And have you ever seen anyone turn around?
Um, I have to say I haven't necessarily had this in my own patients yet, but when I was interning with the acupuncturist that I started apprenticing with in high school, there was someone who had very much like built it into her identity. And oh man, I don't even know how to say it right because it's so complex. But there was a certain part of her that liked the attention of the woe is me,
Mm,
and so, like, which again, that's such a complex, like, hard thing to even say about someone who's, like, in constant pain, but it was a little bit of, like, her crutch for sympathy, her crutch for, like, getting out of things, and she had kind of resigned that she was never gonna get better and, like, was kind of using that as more of, like, her identity. Like, she had become whatever
yeah.
it was that she had. I can't say that I saw her recover from that. A lot of that, I think, with acupuncture and many things, I think therapy, like, is so important to go along with it, especially when something is chronic. I think there was and, you know, it's not our place to do the counseling,
Mhm.
and there are certain practitioners that will be very tough love with someone, which although sometimes I feel like it's needed, I'm not the best person at, like, telling someone that because, like, how do you even tell them that? You know, without if they're not ready yet. It'll be one thing if someone brings it up like, "Well, do you think, like, I might be stunting my healing by having this mindset and, you know, how I play off of it?" That's another thing, but if it's, you know, unsolicited, I generally will hold my tongue, for better or for
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah, it is a very complex issue. I often think about this because, yes, of course, I'm going to have a lot of people come in with various different disorders, but also like various different mindsets. And the reason why I have shifted over to coaching is because I want to
Mhm.
directly address the mindset. It's like it's honestly like number 1 in terms of being able to, especially if you're going to look for a holistic practitioner, it's like a lot of the work actually rests on the patient.
Truly.
Yeah, and it's I think people really need to acknowledge and maybe even know that going in is just we can only do so much for you, but you have to be willing to really take up the reins and do the rest. And sometimes it's just a matter of not giving up on yourself. I think that, there's one patient I always talk about because I really couldn't see how I was going to help her because she did not do a single thing that I told her to do. She did not take her herbs. She lost them, and she had to reorder them. And but she showed up every month for a year. And then after
Showing
that
up is important, that's half the battle.
yeah, and it's like, so many people would have given up on either the practitioner or themselves, but she came, and after a year, she started her herbs, right? And it made a difference. It did make the difference, and I think that, like, even though she was at such a low point in her life, there was just so much going on for her. The fact that I didn't tell her to go away, the fact that I was just like, "Okay, we're gonna make it even more simple this week, and you're gonna come back next time, and we'll see what happens." But yeah, it just takes it's so complex, and it takes a lot. It takes a lot of insight from the practitioner, a lot of patience, and then, yeah, a lot of fortitude from the patient to just kinda keep trying.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I always
mm,
try to meet people where they're at and manage expectations. Like, okay, you can get better. This is what I need from you. If you're still doing the thing that is making you sick, we just need to manage expectations that you're not going to get better, or you're going to get better for like the next 3 to 5 days after your acupuncture treatment, and then you're going to be back to square one. Are you okay with that? And
mm,
generally they're like, "Well, how can we make it more permanent?" I'm like, "Well, lifestyle. Like you get an hour with me. You have 24/7, 365 times however long you've been alive with yourself." So like it's not gonna be me that makes the difference. I'm here to just help facilitate the change. You have to keep it.
absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. So I wanna segue then into what you're doing now with acupuncture about urban salt and your role in that, and, like, what you wanna tell the community, what you wanna tell the world about what you're doing.
Well, first of all, I love it because I've worked for multiple clinics, and the several ones that I worked with before I came to Urban Salt were insurance ran. And so I think that every like practitioners, acupuncturists, people, whoever would benefit greatly from the community style because it's non-insurance based. And we are competitive with copays. So basically something that's affordable for people. We do sliding scale from $35 to $55. I've worked in acupuncture clinics where they're charging upwards of $100
Mhm,
for an acupuncture session and billing the insurance as well. And so, yeah, the accessibility is super important. And there's something to be said for healing with the community as well. But what I really like about it too is that it's a nonprofit. And so that's huge, especially for the practitioners who want to work there because, you already know about my debt, how horrifying that number is. But after working for 10 years there full time, the rest gets forgiven after making,
mhm,
minimum monthly payments. So, like, it's nice to see it because Dr. Candice Lopez, the founder of Urban Salt, has basically given hope to so many of her juniors because there's just like no way like I used to cry myself to sleep
uh,
about my student loans, and there's no need for that. Like, just to become a doctor in the medicine that is like so healing, a lot of people's last resorts, you shouldn't have to go up to debt in your eyeballs in order to like heal other people. So I love working there because it's not only benefiting me, it's benefiting the community, and it's just one in a million. And I hope to see more models follow it. It's truly amazing. But,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, I never wanted to take insurance. I saw a lot of flaws with it when I was in high school and apprenticing. She would be on the phone for, like, a solid 30 minutes trying to get $25, and
Mhm.
then she'd have to hang up because she'd have to go pull needles. And I'm like, "Okay," then she would go start the process all over, and a lot of people could, skirt by this issue, hire a biller, but I'm like, "It shouldn't be that hard for you to get paid for the work you've already done." And, just with other patients, I myself, like, insurance is expensive. There's an affordability crisis when it comes to healthcare, and so it's really important to me to keep it at an affordable rate. People just come in, pay whatever they can, and, essentially, like, you do what you can, you meet the community where you're at, they take care of you also. It's just a beautiful process. I'm so grateful for it having been open.
Yeah. So, let's briefly touch upon what you just said about the insurance stuff and the overall, like, just the landscape that we are in, right? Because I know that part of the reason why urban salt exists is because of this issue.
Mhm.
So can you talk a little bit about, the challenges that people face in getting care and how that fits in with acupuncture
Oh,
specific?
absolutely. Yeah, so, like, for instance, like, the VA is a shining example where it can take you months to get seen for something, and you're just stuck there waiting for your next appointment in a ton of pain, and they're like, "Well, here's some opioids," you know? And I'm like, "Okay, great. That's why we have a crisis in this country with pain pills." And so, basically, acupuncture helps to kind of fill in the gap between their next appointment, if not completely get rid of the issue, depending on what it is, right? And so, like, the VA is kind of a shining example of that. Like, these people are covered, they have care, but they can't receive the care because it's so backlogged and
Mm,
it's not accessible. Like, it might be affordable to them because they've served and now they're able to, like, get it, but it's not accessible. And so we have accessibility and affordability with quality care. And so then you have the other end of, like, private insurance companies that it's accessible, there's plenty out there, you can do it, but it's not affordable. And so we like to kind of bridge it and, like, meet people in the middle and give them a solution, whether it's from, like, appointment A to appointment B, or for instance, like, I have a patient who's, like, getting hip surgery, and this is, like, she can't take medication leading up 10 days into her surgery. So, like, this is her only, like, pain-killing option. And, it's a bit of a Band-Aid because 'cause we're not gonna fix her hip, like, it does need to be replaced, but, like,
mhm.
it is essentially point A to point B, and we're just the in between to help her get there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of issue with that. I know that you haven't been in practice too long, but since you are kind of new to the game, you've probably seen in school just like a lot of the evolution of approaches maybe that have happened in teaching acupuncture in the recent years. From your perspective, what direction do you see and what role do you see acupuncture and Chinese medicine having in the United States in the coming future?
I definitely think it will just blow up because we're finally getting the word out. It's covered by many insurances, so that's already, like, huge. The only issue is a lot of acupuncturists are not wanting to take insurance for undeniable reasons that we don't get paid very well for all the work that we do. So that's probably gonna be, like, the biggest hurdle, but it is definitely becoming something that more and more people use. Like, my grandpa even knows about it, not just because I'm his granddaughter and an acupuncture, but he's like, "Oh, yeah, so and so from church said that they got this," or they're like, "Oh my gosh, you know what? One of my good friends was able to have kids because it helped with fertility." And so it is becoming more of a talking point. You'll see it more on the coasts for sure. It's
Yeah.
definitely more progressive areas, sure. But I do see it becoming something that's more up and coming. The hardest hurdle is kind of getting paid well for what we do by insurance companies because that's going to be like the biggest reason insurances are not going to want to keep covering us is because not enough practitioners want to be on insurance panels because they don't pay well. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword being with the insurance groups because, like, you're gonna help it kind of grow with the masses that way, but then there's also a point of like, well, you gotta be able to pay your bills too.
Yeah,
So, yeah, that's kind of the biggest issue there.
for sure. This is our last question. What would you tell someone who is considering acupuncture but is maybe afraid of doing it or doesn't know too much about it and is hesitant to try it?
My biggest thing is, like, there is truly nothing to lose. Like, why not just see what happens? You know, like, it's an hour of your life, 35 to $55 if you come to Urban Salt, or if they're you might be covered. A lot of times, like, on insurance, they'll cover 1 to 2 a year, so woo, use it up. So, like, there truly is nothing to lose, and if you have reservations or are afraid of needles, then you work with your practitioner and talk about that, and they'll go at your pace. We're all about consent. We don't wanna put you in a position where you feel like you are doing this against your will or there's always ways around things. They're like, "Oh, well, I'm afraid to get it in my hands and my feet." I'm like, "Okay, there's bigger portions of your body that we can do that will still get, like, a pretty similar effect." So there's or we could even do acupressure, just, go in to learn about it, see if it's for you, and truly, like, what's the worst that could happen? You might get a bruise, right? And let's say you end up not wanting to get needled because you can't overcome that fear, then that's okay. Do acupressure. There are always, like, alternatives in acupuncture or the practice of TCM, and that's what I love about it. Like, we even have a little, like, push pin thing that sends
Mhm.
out, like, electricity, and so, like, you can use those on acupoints. We can send you home with ear seeds. Like, it's truly like, just go try it, go learn. Like, anytime anyone has any wants to try, but they're scared, I truly recommend, like, "Well, just do it. Just go see." Like, you don't have to do it for the rest of your life. Just try it for a day and see if it resonates.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Dr. Erica, for being here today.
Yeah.
How can we find you online?
So, I have an Instagram at precision.acupuncture.
And
It's
also
that
Urban
Instagram.
Salt, right?
Yes, at Urban Salt Acu.
Okay, awesome. All right, thank you so much for being here today, and I hope that you have more patients come to see you in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. I love learning more about your medicine too.
Thank you.